My name is Stephen Roth, and the topic I have chosen for my speech today is the importance of the time involved in the recovery process. We tend to think of a disaster as over when the cleanup crews are gone and the utilities are working and the buildings are rebuilt. I will be talking today about a disaster that impacted me personally. On June 19th, in the province of Alberta, Canada, a giant low-pressure system came over the mountains and got stuck in the loop of the jet stream. It started to rain and it kept pouring for at least 15 to 18 hours straight across the southwest part of Alberta. The bullseye of the storm settled down near the town of High River, dumping a total of 12.8 inches in 48 hours. At 7 a.m. on the 20th of June, the town of High River declared a state of emergency and the first evacuations began. By the time the day was over, countless people had been rescued by boat, helicopter, and various equipment and trucks. By the end of the day, the entire town of 13,000 people had been evacuated, and over 90% of the town was several feet deep in water, with some spots having the water reach the second floor. 8 days after the storm, the town was deemed safe enough for most of the residents to return to begin cleanup or to collect salvageable items. Mounds of garbage were created and hauled to the dump that used up a year's worth of landfill in a week. Power was restored to the main floors, furnaces, and water heaters were gradually replaced in almost every home. Last weekend, I was back in High River, 9 months after the flood. Some businesses are up and running, back in their original spots. Others are still operating out trailers in the row behind the museum. Still others have chosen to close their doors for good, unable to withstand the financial loss. Majority of the businesses have sustained severe damage for the owners who were trying to deal with cleaning up their homes. The additional loss of their buildings were too overwhelming. The greatest impact of the flood was on the emotional lives of the residents of High River. The majority of the homes are reoccupied, but there are still families living in government trailers created for displaced families. Rents are high for the few available apartments and homes. The houses cannot be bought or sold until insurance and government payouts have been settled. The familiar is gone. Stores are no longer in the same location. School children are being bused between buildings until their classrooms and schools are repaired. And the railroad bridge into town is no longer there. There are red condemned signs on some of the doors. The town is still a mass of mud and broken trees, and the museum has lost accumulated history. There is one neighborhood that was completely condemned except for 2 houses, causing controversy among the neighbors as to why their house wasn't saved. The area is slated to become a future park. Now I'm going to be talking about some of the people I met while I was there. I spent time with a man named Rocky, diagnosed with Parkinson's disease shortly before the flood. He had to cope with the loss of his basement and his art gallery. He estimates that he lost about $300,000 worth of art in the flood. His symptoms have become worse because of the stress, leaving him unable to paint due to the shaking of his hands. Now my grandfather, which you could say he built the town of High River, had built many of the buildings in the business community. The radio station, the newspaper office, and the local hardware store, to name a few. He had spent many hours volunteering at a local park, building shelters and bathrooms, and also spent countless hours volunteering at a historical village and the museum, restoring buildings and creating displays to give future generations a sense of history. He too sadly lost his basement to the floodwaters and much of his art, woodworking, and stained glass projects. And while he did survive the flood, he did not survive the stress of the recovery. He passed away March 20th at the age of 88 of a massive brain bleed, a victim of the stress caused by the loss of the familiar, the mounds of the paperwork, and the energy expanded doing much of rebuilding his basement himself. When we think of recovery, we need to remember that it is a long process that lasts far longer than the leaving of the last emergency personnel and the rebuilding of the roads and buildings. The hard part of recovery is the impact of the people involved and how their lives have been changed forever. By the time the day was over,